Flight.
Safe Light Repair, Safe Light Replace.
Some new details emerging about the 2008 murders of Jennifer Hudson's family. New information from interviews that Chicago police conducted with the Oscar-winning singer and her sister. Well, the man accused of killing Hudson's mother, brother, and nephew set to go on trial in about 2 months from now. But there are reportedly still some major legal hurdles confronting prosecutors in this case. Trial attorneys Rachel Self and David Wool take a look at some of those issues. David, let me start with you. The defendant was married to Jennifer Hudson's sister, Julia.
Right.
Now, Julia is prepared to take the witness stand and testify that there were at least 24 threats the defendant made to her. Is that admissible?
Well, unfortunately, in Illinois, it doesn't appear that it is, Greg. I mean, there's a spousal privilege that prevents her from testifying to any communications, admissions, confessions that took place between the two while they were married. Now, while some of those dozen threats of violence and death took place in a 10-month period before the murder, while they were legally separated, or at least separated, it doesn't appear that that's going to get around the exception. It looks like that won't come in at all. It's going to be blocked by a very prohibitive law in Illinois. So it's going to be a circumstantial case that's going to be very difficult to prosecute.
Rachel, can prosecutors squeeze that in through an exception to the spousal privilege rule?
I absolutely believe they can, Greg. And the reason is because privileges are very strictly construed because they interfere with the truth-seeking process. And under the Illinois Criminal Code, there are 5 exceptions to when a person can violate or testify against their spouse and violate marital privilege. And one of them is the child care exception, and the other is the property exception, both of which apply here. In this case, there was a child that was in danger, and that child was then murdered by this person. This person doesn't now get to, under this exception and under the regulatory authority, the statutory authority, and the common case law, then hide behind spousal privilege, because the privilege very clearly states and delineates any child in the care, custody, or control of either spouse in the interests of that child.
Right.
And it's very broadly construed to protect that child.
David, what about, I mean, the child we're talking about is Julian, who was 7 years old. He was found miles from the murder scene, himself killed with a gunshot wound. The gun was found nearby. There's a picture of Julian. Doesn't the spousal privilege get negated by the rule that pertains to children and the protection of them?
It doesn't, because it has to be a spouse that is the spouse of both of, I'm sorry, the child of both spouses, and it has to be the spouse and the other spouse that have an interest directly in that child. This was not
true.
William Balfour's
Seriously, it has to be the biological child?
No, that's not true.
It has to be a spouse that's in contest in a court action. And when that's the case, there's an exception to the spousal privilege. But that's not the case here.
Rachel?
This was not Julian. This was not
if David
Balfour's
can find me a case, if David can find me a case that says that in Illinois it has to be the person's biological child, that's not what the statute says.
It does say that specifically.
I'm not sure that biology would dictate an exception
biology,
to the
Greg.
spousal privilege.
It doesn't have to be biology, but it has to be the child whose interest is present in the particular litigation, and this isn't it. The only issue here, Greg, if they're going to succeed in this prosecution, there was a gun found next to the child. Making a link between that gun and William Balfour, that's going to be the tricky thing, because all we have now is hearsay evidence.
Is there enough evidence, do you think, for prosecutors to succeed based on ballistics, pure and simple? I mean, the gun was found near the car, it's connected to the murders, and there are witnesses apparently prepared to testify that the defendant bragged about stealing that gun and having it in his possession. Rachel?
Oh, I think that they're definitely going to be able to. And even if they can't connect him by, say, putting fingerprints of his on the gun, they're going to be able to connect it with all of the circumstantial evidence, the witnesses that they have. Mr. Balfour is going to go down, and he should go down for these 3 murders.
Greg, here's the problem with that, Greg. The problem they have is hearsay evidence, triple hearsay. It's actress Jennifer Hudson, saying that her sister, Julia Hudson, heard that Balfour at some point was bragging about stealing that gun from her brother. That's not going to cut the mustard.
They're going to come up. I bet you they'll come up with the direct witnesses to that, and
that's going to be the key.
And it's only hearsay, not double or triple. All right, Rachel Self, David Wool, good to see you both. Thanks.
Good to see you, Greg.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Coming up, shocking new numbers about your kids' diet. 1 out of every 6 calories is coming from added sugar, making our kids fat. Coming up, where sugars are hiding on your dinner table.